Brazil's Supreme Federal Court postponed the rule on the so-called time frame argument, which could redefine the demarcation of protected indigenous lands. Bolivian authorities this Wednesday denounced the role of the Secretary General of the Organization of American States in the coup perpetrated in 2019 against the government of Evo Morales. At least 20 Palestinians were injured by Israeli forces at Gaza's border on Wednesday as protests continue against the brutal occupation and blockade. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Gladys Quesada. And now we begin with the news. The Brazilian Supreme Federal Court postponed this Wednesday its deliberations on the so-called time frame argument, which could redefine the demarcation of protected indigenous lands. After the suspension, it is estimated that around next Thursday, the court will analyze the land recovery lawsuit filed by the agribusiness sector in the southern state of Santa Catarina against indigenous communities, challenging the right to protect the ancestral land. According to the time frame argument, indigenous peoples only have the right to a territory that they were physically occupying on October 5, 1988, the day the current constitution came into force. If this argument succeeds, it will legitimize centuries of evictions experienced by indigenous peoples throughout Brazil. The court's ruling is being closely followed by a mobilization of more than 6,000 indigenous people who marched to the capital, Brasilia, where they have camped out against the move, which will see them strip of their lands in the interests of agribusinesses, mining and logging companies. Hundreds of people demonstrated outside the Brazilian embassy in London on Wednesday to protest against far-right President Jair Bolsonaro's harmful policies towards the country's indigenous people. The move came as a ruling on a bid supported by Bolsonaro is expected, which will see indigenous people stripped of their ancestral lands. The Bolsonaro administration has been heavily criticized internationally for its destructive policies in the Amazon, in the interest of agribusinesses, logging and mining. The UK protest also comes as the environmental campaign group Extinction Rebellion holds ongoing mobilizations in central London against the use of fossil fuels and to call for more action to tackle climate change. And now we move on to other informations. Members of the Association of State Workers of Argentina carried out strike action in the capital to protest jobs insecurity and to demand higher wages from the Buenos Aires government. We have more details in the following report from our correspondent, Carolina Silvestre.
State sector workers in the autonomous city of Buenos Aires held a 24-hour strike, which was combined with a mobilization toward the city government headquarters. We are conducting a strike of all city government workers, and we are demanding the immediate reinstatement of all the workers who face job insecurity in the government of Rodriguez Larreta. There are more than 20,000 hired workers on the precarious contracting arrangements who receive miserable wages, who don't have their labor rights guaranteed. And this is the case of health sector employees, crime prevention employees, and those in all government departments in the capital city of Argentina.
We are in this contracting situation where we have life insurance that in effect does not cover us at all. We are cast adrift in the streets because we are highly exposed as we work with the city police, and the risks we face are too many to be in precarious conditions. Another crucial point is that hospitals should be open to provide care to all citizens and to all patients in need, that they should stop being refunctioned, that they should return to full operation because people need care for all conditions.
Demonstrators and their union leaders made their demands clear during the protest.
We are asking for the recognition of nursing personnel as professionals. Although it might seem unbelievable, after 2 years of pandemic, the city of Buenos Aires denies the status of nursing as a career. These are the people working all day, all night, all year long to save our lives, and they are treated as administrative personnel. We are working precisely so that we can have decent working conditions. It is the lowest family living wage in Argentina. To give you an example, with the wages that Larreta pays, we cannot even buy half a kilo of yerba mate.
Union leader Daniel Catalano also made a serious accusation against Horacio Rodriguez Larreta's administration related to the current electoral process.
A low childhood budget, low health budget, low education budget, that is why we are demonstrating. And all this is in the midst of the pandemic because before we were in a worse situation and now they are persecuting and forcing public workers to place tables in the streets to campaign for Maria Eugenia Vidal. In other words, not only they are persecuting you, harassing you, impoverishing you, starving you, but now, if you do not place a table and hand out leaflets for Vidal's elections, you are also part of the problem and they threaten to fire you.
The Association of State Workers warned that if the government of Buenos Aires doesn't respond to their demands, they will continue with more strike actions while taking precautionary measures in the face of the ongoing pandemic.
Carolina Silvestre, Telesur, Buenos Aires.
Colombia's National Mining Agency confirmed Wednesday the death of 12 workers after an explosion at an illegal coal mine located in the central department of Boyacá. The explosion was caused by an accumulation of methane gas and coal dust, causing the collapse of the mine. So far, 4 of the victims have been identified. According to the mining authority, around 60% of all fatal mining accidents this year occur on illegal mines. Despite the risks, many continue to mine illegally in the face of lack of other sources of income. In the past year, over 170 people have been killed in mining accidents in Colombia. Wildfires in Russia have spread to central regions of the country. Fueled by an unusual heat wave, the blazes have burned throughout an area of over 90,000 kilometers. The Emergencies Ministry reported that authorities are currently battling over 50 fires in several central areas. In Mordovia, firefighters reported having to escape from a ring of fire. President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday pledged millions of dollars to protect the country's forest land. He described the recent natural disasters as unprecedented, having extended to Siberia, and stressed they are directly linked to climate change. Authorities are assisting the affected communities with help from the Russian National Guard and military planes, which are dropping water bombs over the flames. We'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back. Bolivian authorities this Wednesday denounced the role of the Secretary General of the Organization of American States in the coup perpetrated in 2019 against the government of Evo Morales. At an extraordinary session of the OAS Permanent Council, the ambassador of Bolivia, Héctor Arce Saconeta, accused Secretary General Luis Almagro of having carried out acts of intervention in the internal affairs of his country. It should be recalled that the OAS released a report citing electoral fraud in the October 2019 elections without any evidence, which served as justification for the far-right sectors that perpetrated the coup. Bolivian Foreign Minister Rogelio Mayra also stressed that the hate messages of the Secretary General sparked division within the OAS and encouraged its member countries to consider creating a new organization.
Today, we ask the Secretary General of the OAS refrain from committing further acts of intervention and let the Bolivian justice system do its job. Bolivia firmly rejects any statement by the OAS Secretary General because Almagro represents the pain, death, and humiliation of the Bolivian people.
And Bolivian Foreign Minister Rogelio Mayra referred to the false accusations of electoral fraud made by the Organization of American States as part of the plot to oust former President Evo Morales.
Bolivia against the members of the Supreme Electoral Court for the alleged fraud the Secretariat claimed had occurred in the elections This expert report concludes that there was no questionable manipulation of the information in that electoral process. It points out flaws, but nothing that allows to objectively sustain that there was a criminal act such as fraud.
The current tour of Southeast Asia by the United States Vice President Kamala Harris represents the latest attempt by the White House to convince the region of its reliability amid the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan, and also to strengthen ties with key allies in the region. More in the following report from our correspondent Iramzi Peraza.
In the middle of a chaotic pullout from Afghanistan and the Taliban's lightning takeover of the country, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris started a short tour to Southeast Asia, an important area for Washington to counterweight China's growing influence in the region. The trip aimed at bolstering ties in the region as part of U.S. efforts to counter China's dominance in the Indo-Pacific area and also reaffirm allies of Washington's commitment in the wake of a chaotic Afghanistan exit after a two-decade-long conflict. At a joint press conference with Singapore's Prime Minister after the meetings, Vice President Harris offered a sharp rebuke of China, saying that Beijing undermines the rules-based order and threatens the sovereignty of nations. China's response was swift, and government authorities in Beijing condemned the hegemonic and interfering behavior of the United States.
The United States can wantonly launch a military intervention against any country without taking responsibility for the suffering of the people. The US can come and go as it wishes and doesn't need to seek the international community's opinions, not even those of its allies. In order to defend America first, the US can arbitrarily smear, suppress, coerce, and bully other countries and without paying any price. This is the order the US wants. The US is constantly attempting to use rules and order to defend its selfish bullying and hegemonic behavior, but how many people will believe them now?
Beijing has always denounced the United States' attempts to create conflicts with its Asian partners, especially over the territorial claims in the South China Sea, a strategic waterway with potential oil and gas riches. During her visit to Southeast Asia, Kamala Harris stated that much of the history of the 21st century is happening in this region, where most of the world's population is and whose economic weight is growing. Some experts point out whether the Obama administration's policy towards Asia, which continues to this day, will be characterized by the same mistake of the past, or whether Washington is prepared to do things differently against a rival as important as China.
This Wednesday, the World Health Organization discussed its proposed scientific advisory group for the origins of novel pathogens. The move comes in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and seeks to prevent future threats.
SEGO will be composed of experts acting in their own capacity, not as representatives of member states, and will play a vital role in studying the emergence of new pathogens, including the next phase of studies into the origins of SARS-CoV-2.
What is clear is that global health security is dangerously underfunded. We are consequently vulnerable to a prolonged COVID-19 pandemic with repeated waves affecting all countries, and we are also vulnerable to future pandemics.
Although there has been a slight stabilization in the last week after 2 months of rising COVID-19 fatalities, the world is now approaching an overall death toll of 4.5 million. The World Health Organization confirmed the figure in its most recent epidemiological report. The organization pointed out that the countries with the highest COVID-19 mortality rates are the United States, India, the United Kingdom, and Brazil. The report also highlights the total number of infections recorded since the beginning of the pandemic has reached 214 million. The WHO also noted several studies showing that licensed vaccines protect against severe form of the disease, but evidence suggests that they are less effective in preventing infection with the Delta variant. And the Cuban government is assessing the epidemiological situation and the measures in place in the face of the ongoing surge in COVID-19 cases in the country. Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel met with the government's temporary working group for the control and prevention of COVID-19. The situation regarding the medical oxygen supply nationwide was analyzed, and authorities from the province of Santi Spiritus were instructed to reinforce the primary health care system as the area deals with a strong outbreak of the virus. A group of scientists also presented the results of the trials of new treatment options against COVID-19. During the trials, the drug Nimotop-Sumac was administered to 49 patients in a severe condition, and 82% fully recovered, demonstrating its effectiveness.
Despite the number of cases, the recovery rate remains above 90%, the recovery rate of confirmed cases. We also evaluate the work of, that is to say, the work of, well, of doctors, nurses, even of scientists, because of all the drugs used. That is to say, it takes time in hospital for people to recover, but it also takes resources that are invested to ensure that people can recover and return to normal life in the shortest period of time.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. At least 20 Palestinians were injured by Israeli forces at Gaza's border on Wednesday. The latest violence came after a Palestinian man died of injuries sustained when Israeli forces attacked protesters on the fence that separates Gaza from Israel over the weekend. Mourners in Gaza on Wednesday held the funeral of Osama Khaled Dayah, who died earlier in the day after being shot by Israeli forces during the protests on Saturday. The mobilizations mark the 52nd anniversary of the burning of Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem and were met with a live fire from the Israeli occupation forces, injuring 41 protesters, including 15 children. The protests were also organized to draw attention to the 14-year blockade that Israel has imposed on Gaza since 2007 and Israel's obstruction of Gaza's reconstruction. 2 million Palestinians live in the Gaza Strip, known as the world's biggest open-air prison, which has been subjected to repeated military attacks that have heavily damaged much of its infrastructure while killing thousands. Iran's parliament on Wednesday approved almost all of the cabinet members nominated by the new president, Ebrahim Raisi. The move enables the new president to get to work on addressing the country's pressing needs following his election victory in June. Lawmakers approved 18 of the 19 candidates put forward for the ministerial posts, only rejecting Raisi's pick for the education portfolio, thus requiring the president to nominate another figure for that post. Raisi inherits a difficult socio-economic situation as the country continues to be strangled financially by sanctions reimposed by Washington after then U.S. President Donald Trump pulled out of the landmark Iran nuclear deal in 2018. The crisis has been aggravated by the COVID-19 pandemic, with the country currently grappling with a fifth wave of infections, yet strongest wave. Afghan journalists fleeing the country arrived in Mexico on Wednesday as the Central American nation welcomes around 130 were received by Foreign Secretary Marcelo Ebrard at Mexico City Airport. Hours earlier, several members of an all-girl Afghan robotics team were also received at the airport by the Foreign Secretary and offered a press conference. The Taliban seizure of power over a week ago has fueled a chaotic mass exodus as many Afghans fear a repeat of the brutal rule imposed from 1996 to 2001.
Mexico has decided to support humanitarian, refugee, asylum, and humanitarian visa applications for people in Afghanistan. keeping with Mexico's tradition of asylum and refuge and humanitarian support.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For Telesur English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.
Follow the most important global events through a comprehensive perspective. With a team of journalists in 25 locations around the world to convey our people's reality.